Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Elseworlds Exchange Live. I'm Sal.
And I'm Joel.
A lot of people are asking what the hell this Omniverse thing is, including myself. People were like, people were bombing in on our other show, Off the Rack, which is a live comic book review show that takes place on Mondays, in which they were like, hey, what are your opinions about the Omniverse or about DC's continuity? And I'm like, I vaguely recall an article about no continuity, but like, I don't have any frame of reference for it. And then we were talking and you mentioned the Omniverse as well. And I'm like, okay, Joel's talking about the Omniverse too. What the hell is going on here? So I've got an article here. I've got it pinned in the live chat, which, by the way, if you were watching the show live, you can always read the chat and participate there. And you can find the Bleeding Cool article that kind of runs down what the hell the Omniverse is supposed to be based on Bleeding Cool's inside sources, which only was posted about 24 hours ago. So it's the most recent information we could find. And again, I should stress, not truly information. It's all hearsay and it's all rumor and conjecture. Yeah. So take it with a grain of salt. This is all conjecture. We don't know. We know people at DC. No. We don't ask them to tell us insider information and then couch it in a secret podcast where we're like, yeah, well, I don't, hypothetically speaking, what if these people were working on these books? Like, no, we're not like that. But
but I mean, we really should start doing that. I imagine that'd be a good business move.
Well, yeah. Well, the thing about that is we'd lose our clients fairly quickly because the people, our wellspring of information would be like, you did a show where you basically shared the information that like me and two other people knew. And the two other people asked me where the hell they found out about it. And I was like, fuck.
Never burn your sources in journalism.
Damn right. But I should stress, we are not journalists. We are just commentators. But if you are in the chat, you can always support the show by using super chats, ask a question or comment. We'll weave it here onto the show, and it's where we get some additional shekels, especially since YouTube is screwing with everything. And I heard, here's an inside tip. I heard a YouTube source say we haven't changed the algorithm at all.
Well, fuck.
I know, and I'm like, oh, so we're just really doing poorly, and it's like, no. You look across the board, something happened. Like,
you know what that is? That sounds like a horror movie where it's like, we haven't changed the algorithm in 20 years. Oh my god, it's alive! It's making moves without us.
Exactly. Like, I could imagine them saying like algorithm, and then them going in and being like, oh shit, it's Skynet. Like it's become self-aware, and it's bebopping and scatting all over us. What of the PewDiePies? What of Jimmy Fallon?
I can't let you do that, Jimmy.
Oh, yeah.
YouTube, is that you? How is that not a horror movie? YouTube becomes sentient and tries to kill some people.
I don't know. I have a hell of a movie pitch about YouTube, but we're not here for that. So I'll share. Actually, you know what? Before we do, because I got the article here, you can read it in the chat right now. But if you want to talk about it, Joel, what the hell's the Omniverse? Do you even remember where this even came up? I feel like it spins out of death metal. Is that true?
Yeah, I feel like I only just read it in that last death metal tie-in where we have the agent of the source, the guy who looks like Cosmic Ghost Rider but isn't Cosmic Ghost Rider, saying, oh, I am an agent of the Omniverse. I am a couple cosmic rungs up above you all. But basically it's all a meta joke about it. He's a guy who doesn't read DC Comics and how he needs to try and understand DC Comics and how utterly and horribly confusing it all is. And then Metron gives like a super Neil Gaiman-esque speech about the power of stories.
Yep.
And that somehow sways him.
Yeah, that's what that was. Yeah, he shows up, this Watcher ripoff shows up coincidentally just around the time when everything has been burned to ash, and he's like, I've seen realities, but this one's so colorful and cyclical. What's the story there? Let me resurrect Metron and find out. But yeah, I know especially that the Omniverse is a thing that's been hinted at given what came before and where DC is publishing-wise. It's funny how, people are really concerned about the story. People are really concerned about the universe, continuity. Does it matter? Yeah. Is there going to be any? But you can't talk about that without peeling back the layers of what DC is doing as a publishing company and where they're going as a house of ideas, to lowercase all of those. Because DC, of course, has been in a state of flux forever. And more recently, because of the ousting of DiDio and the reorganization of 5G into future state and the changing of the guard regarding editors-in-chief, presidents, publishers, and the
got a new editor-in-chief just this week.
I know, and by the way, it was 50% of the old editor-in-chiefs, because like there were two transitional editor-in-chiefs, and then one of them became the true editor-in-chief. They probably fought in some kind of gladiatorial arena. Hopefully, the video will be out there soon.
An Agni Kai fire duel.
Exactly. I'm sure the other one just got a nice severance package, though. But in that regard, DC has been shifting their focus, and I've heard through the grapevine, so to speak, that DC is putting a big shift on digital and on IP, and less so on comics. So what you're saying is they're gonna Marvel up their books, and of course I'm joking a little bit, because Marvel has pretty much just done whatever Marvel does for the last like however many years. And
Lord knows I'm reading more Marvel books now than DC books right now.
Yeah, but that, you know, and that's 6 in 1, right? Because like DC is right now ensconced in a massive event. They just changed over, you know, creative teams not but a year ago for Batman. There's a huge event that just happened. You know, the 3 Jokers just came out. Things are kind of funny right now at DC, and
boy are they.
And so there's a question about like what the focus is and what this Omniverse thing is doing as a consequence of what DC's plan is as a company. So what I would say right away is at the top of the show, or at the top of this conversation, is DC is restructuring and reorganizing and refocusing.
Yes.
I know, and I think I can say this because I don't have to reveal a source, that internally at DC Comics, no one at Warner Brothers, AT&T, DC Comics, no one refers to it as DC Comics.
Really? That's shocking.
It is officially not DC Comics. Unofficially not DC Comics. They call it DC. That's it.
Just all,
Interesting. And they don't refer to one thing or the other. They're not like, so DC Comics and DC Universe and DC Movies, and they just go DC. And then they go, which one? The comic, the book, the digital show, which one? So
that is a very interesting piece of information.
Right? So that for them, they're focusing on, they're looking at it as DC. Like, this is
it's a monolith.
Yeah, it's a monolith chock full of colorful action figures that we can monetize. That's what their approach is.
Right.
So from that, we look at the Omniverse. What is it? What's the plan? Or at the very least, what can we ascertain is the plan? And how does that factor in? So let's talk about that. So in continuity, which is to say within DC Metal or Death Metal, Joel, you mentioned the Watcher character says he's the guy who drops the ball or drops the bomb on what is that? Like, what is the Omniverse?
Even then, they're still pretty vague about it.
Oh, absolutely. Well, because we do know that, like, originally there was a timeline for the DC Universe. That Dan
we got rid of that.
Finagled this whole thing where it's like, this is what happened, this is what didn't happen, this is what matters, this is what doesn't matter. And what is becoming apparently clear in Death Metal, and I think Snyder said this in interviews, even with us, where he said that basically it all matters and it all kind of happened. And we see that kind of focused through an image of Wonder Woman. I think there's a cover where like Wonder Woman's looking, you know, in her Death Metal outfit at like the Golden Age Wonder Woman.
Right, because Golden Age Wonder Woman is also going to be part of another big anthology story coming up, which I think them recycling the Wonder Woman JSA stuff they were going to have for generations, where it's like, no, she was the first super. Remember that? They were all gung-ho about how Wonder Woman was the first superhero to coincide with her movie that was coming out. And then they're like, did we say that? We meant, we don't know. We forget. Yeah. Now Generations is also not going to be connected. Generations is its own thing in the Omniverse now. But it was supposed to all be connected. Yeah, but we easily changed it by changing a couple lines.
Exactly. Well, and it makes it easier for us because our editors don't have to try and make it make sense or fit into any kind of box. It's just, well, there's this other thing that Dan Jurgens is working on. There's this Future State, which somebody else is working on, and then there's the regular comics, and then there's Black Label, and there's, you know, any of this the remaining threaded vestiges of our other publishing lines, like Wonder Comics or Young Animal or Sandman Universe. So, you know, we got all kinds of different, you know, plates in the air, so to speak.
And we don't even have to make the main universe continuity stories make sense anymore either, because Perpetua broke time. So that's okay that nothing's lined up for like a year and a half, because Perpetua did it. Whenever there's something you don't understand, Perpetua did it.
Exactly. So it's an in-canon, in-continuity explanation for what DC is going to be doing from now on, where instead of DiDio spending probably a whole week in his office on his floor with like push pins and corkboards going like, what worked, what didn't work, how does this work, I don't understand, okay, I like this story, I don't like this character, get rid of Dick Grayson, get rid of Wally, but make this matter, but how do I massage the fans to make them feel good but also like buy my books? I think that as far as DC Comics is concerned, they are going to be less concerned than ever about what happened and what matters.
So what you're saying, Sal, is creativity over continuity? I remember once upon a time where that was also their tagline.
Yes, I think that is absolutely what they're saying, but I think they're doing it in a kind of like, I don't know if I want to call it deceptive or manipulative way, but it is a little bit, because I think what they're doing is they're like, okay, so we're going to just do whatever we want. And I don't want to have to keep answering these freaking people's questions. And I don't want to have to keep like getting inundated whenever we celebrate some kind of achievement we're about to accomplish. And it's just people going like, you know, justice for Wally. You know, I don't want to see that anymore. So Scott, write an epic story or reconfigure your epic story to in continuity. Make it so that within like the threads of reality itself in the DC universe, continuity doesn't matter.
But didn't Jeff Johns already do that with the Metaverse and Superman being the...
No. He don't work here no more. He's his own company. And listen, you know what? If he, you know, yes, okay, he did Doomsday Clock and it said its own thing. But like, that doesn't work for our plans, though.
No, not anymore.
So that's gone. So if anybody's like, hey, how does Doomsday Clock fit in? Guess what? It don't. Forget it. Where does Three Jokers fit in? But they use Red Hood. Guess what? It don't. And it doesn't even matter if it like if you can Marvel no prize this thing and be like, no, but here, see, and you make it work, because at the end of the day, any changes that Jeff Johns made are not going to be folded into the company plan because he doesn't work there anymore. And his vision for DC is contrary to the vision that DC's current masters have. So
did you get all the same questions I did after Three Jokers, where it's like, well, how does this tie into Batman on the Mobius chair? And he asked a question. I'm like, okay, A, that was years ago and several fucking delays ago. Secondly, this is Black Label, which is its own thing, and Alfred is alive, and Red Hood's costume is different. Are you really asking these questions right now? Do people not pay attention? Well, my sweet summer child.
I agree that they don't work, but I also have an issue where, like, I don't say that because it's Black Label, it de facto is not in continuity, because Black Label is meaningless. And
exactly,
it's just a rating system now. And even then, not even a very toothy rating system, because
not at all.
It doesn't matter. And because we already know there's like okay, here's our brand for ratings, but secretly we have another rating system that we use internally that gets, before we even get art, or if we do get art, change it, you know? But Black Label,
a little bit more and a little bit more blood, but not much.
And a couple of butts, but like, you know, those butts better not turn around. Let me tell you that.
But only side butt.
Yeah, but that is with Three Jokers. You know, it's just it's more out of continuity because Jeff Johns wrote it.
Yeah.
Than it is because it's Black Label.
Yeah.
And Alfred's alive because they wrote the damn thing 4 years ago, and even though they knew it was coming out, and I've heard rumors they changed it, but I don't want to, you know, give those any credence. Jeff Johns is like, yeah, he'll be back. Fuck that.
Yeah, really. He's always back.
Like, I'm not gonna screw up my epic, like, hardcover Killing Joke sequel by having Lucius in the cave or something. It's already gonna confuse people. The fact that Red Hood's there, because clearly Johns didn't read any Red Hood books.
And why would he? Because those sucked.
I don't know. I think you didn't you like Red Hood with Bizarro and Artemis and whatnot?
No, I was not. I didn't read word one of it because Scott Lobdell sucks and is never going to work in comics again because he's a bad person.
Oh, that's fair. I know that Benny likes it.
Not reading it.
There you go.
Yeah, Benny's the one who liked it.
Benny's the one who likes it.
I think Benny and Caitlin were the ones who were holding torches for it's like, you got to read. I'm like, no, I don't. And now I feel justified in not having to read any of it. Super excited for the new run, though.
Right. I feel bad because, like, you know, Jason had some... Listen, nobody wanted to do anything with Jason, least of all me. And somebody, it was Lobdell, but, like, somebody did something with him. And it didn't force him into the Bat family. It was more like anyone else put him in the Bat family. Like, everyone else was like, no, Jason's in the Bat family. Like, what? But Lobdell at least gave him characters and things to do that were over there. Like, so that people who wanted to have like a zombie Punisher in the DC universe could have that book. All right, there you go. You get your book.
I guess.
But I digress. Alex M says DC hasn't really stuck to continuity since DCU. Apart from the beginning of Rebirth, continuity's been based on writers' version of timelines. I think that's more your feeling, but I promise you that, editorially speaking, DC editors and publishers didn't care too much about continuity, but like neither do Marvel's. They're more just like, if you can make it fit, feel free.
That'd be nice.
And like, you can't have anything glaring, you know? Yeah. But tell your story. And, you know, and if you care enough to make it make sense, good on you, and we'll focus on it a little bit. And
I mean, that's comics as a whole, really, isn't it? We'd like it if it lined up, but, you know.
Right. I'd really appreciate it if you'd line it up for me, please. Because with Marvel's situation, they're like, well, we only have like 3 editors. Like, so, and we put out like 80 books a month. But with DC, it's more like, yeah, whatever. I mean, I think that they cared, particularly back during DCU. DCU was not... People compare this to DCU, and I don't think that's fair, because I remember when DCU came out, and DCU was more like, we're trying something. But
yeah, we're trying new shit.
It wasn't a line-wide continuity doesn't matter. In fact, any of the DCU titles that affected the Trinity were, like, steeped in continuity, or at least the recent continuity. Like, Superman has no powers. It's not like they said Superman has no powers, end of story. It was due to story and continuity that he had no powers. Mm-hmm. And Batman's Jim Gordon. And it's not like he just was Batman. It's because of these stories that were in continuity that led up to it. Like, you know, Black Canary, yes. But again, Black Canary was one of those books where it's like, we're not selling you Black Canary. We're selling them Black Canary. Like, we're trying to get other people. DCU was about getting other people to read comics. And
Midnighter, Prez, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly. And even then, like, Midnighter was so fringe, it didn't matter if it was in continuity or not. Like, in fact, you could even
you could have told those stories at any time,
and you could go, you know what? Yeah, that is in continuity. Like, sure, you know. So DCU, I don't think is an apt comparison, because this is DCU. If DCU had been like, we're throwing away continuity and we're just going to do whatever we want, like everything's an Elseworlds book or not.
Yeah,
that would be a thing, and I feel like that's where we are now. Radical Radish, if this means they'll cut down on giant events, cutting into other people's stories every 5 minutes, then I'm all for it.
Boy, that'd be nice, wouldn't it?
I've heard a lot of people who are very excited about the idea of DC, quote unquote, throwing away continuity, which I don't know if this is what they're doing.
No, I don't think so either.
So what is the Omniverse? What does this mean?
I think it means basically, and this is another thing, and we talked about this even before we went on mic, and I've mentioned this on the ComicPOP Facebook group as well. Everyone's like, oh, what is this going to mean for continuity? What's it going to mean for my stories? It's already happening, guys. Have you not noticed that like 5 of the biggest, most best-selling, best-reviewed DC books, Deceased, what is it, 3 Jokers, the Sean Gordon Murphy,
White Knight,
Yeah, the White Knightiverse. These are all stories in different continuities and different universes. They're their own thing unto themselves. Dead Earth. Injustice, which is back again.
Yeah, Year Zero or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, the Batman the Animated Series book they're doing. Yeah. Again, all their own universe, all their own thing. You can pick it up and read it, and you don't need to know that much else.
Yeah, if DC looked at their bottom line and they were like, the top 10 out of like 30 books that we publish that sell best are out of continuity, then clearly continuity is less important than selling people this. Now, I caution against it. Against that strategy, and we'll get into that in a minute as to why. But Rusky says DC needs to copy the one thing that makes Marvel matter: one long continuous story that doesn't get reset.
They're never going to do that because DC is addicted to crises. They're a junkie. Just one more. They'll be fine for 5 to 8 years. Just give me one more sweet hit of that brown sugar. Come on.
The problem with DC and their long continuity is just the fact that they're older. Like just by virtue of them being older, they can't get away with it. Now, obviously, Marvel's 80 years old, so it's like, okay, at some point or another, that argument becomes less valid. But because Marvel all happened and started in the 60s, and it all happened by like the creation of like 3 or 4 people, and it all happened within a couple of months of each other, you know, there's more of a bedrock of continuity to be shared, because like the first Amazing Spider-Man comic has the Fantastic Four in it. The first Batman book does not have Superman in it. You know what I mean?
No, it does not.
In fact, most of the DC pantheon all existed in their own universes before they all got mixed together anyway.
There you go, DC, of course, the great Borg of comic books, absorbing other stuff like, oh, we'll take you, Captain Marvel, Shazam, and we'll take you, Charleston comic characters and everything else.
I like to think of them more of as a chimera.
That's good.
But it's true that you know, because of DC's, you know, kind of patchwork universe and their age, it's harder to say this all happened in one story, particularly because Marvel's more willing to be like, yeah, that was goofy shit and it happened.
Yeah, deal with it.
As opposed to DC, where it's like, yeah, that goofy shit happened in the 50s and Batman went to space and he got married and had kids and stuff. Like, I can't make that all happen in one continuity. Mm-hmm. And because our characters are more like godlike archetypes, it's harder to make them, you know, a narrative about this one person who lives from here to here and never gets old. I mean, you have to just keep recycling it. I don't know. I think that if DC wanted to test it, the way to do it is to ultimate it, which is what I was hoping Earth 1 was going to be, where it's like, yeah, no, it's one contiguous continuity with all the characters in it, and it starts here and it goes forever. Like it just doesn't interrupt itself, and there's no crises. You know, it's just things that happen to these people forever. But yeah, Alex Cash says, the rise of the new god tie-in wasn't even Snyder, it was Tynan. Introducing the Omniverse this late into the event by another author? Woof. Feels like they're pivoting their pivot and there is no plan. I think... Well, go ahead.
Or no, you go. I was going to say, well, here's the thing about death metal. You're all taking death metal too seriously. Death metal is a comedy. It's always been a comedy. It's jokes. They're riffing. If they did it seriously, it would just be death metal again. I think so many people are missing the fact that this is Snyder and company trying something they've never done before, which is let's write a funny self-referential book, which is literally what they're doing. I mean, come on, characters are routinely stopping and talking about the importance of stories and talking about DC's own crisis addiction and how crises happen because people lose faith in heroes and they're not doing their jobs and things need to be reset. This is a meta comedy romp is what this is that everyone's treating like a real story.
Well, I agree it is, but I think that the problem is that DC editorial / DC the company is like, this is the biggest thing that's going to happen in continuity from now on. Like this is
January.
It. So, well, and it might be like the last in continuity big event at DC. You have to explain what we're going to do.
Right.
Like, you have to turn this joke into an explanation and justification for our new approach, which I think Alex is right, is a pivot. Like, I think that it's, well, because it had to have been, because pre-pandemic, the deal worked there and there was going to be a thing. Like, there was going to be a timeline in 5G and this new publishing initiative that was going to directly benefit / favor comic book retailers. And now that guy's gone, timeline's gone, 5G reorganized into this thing that might help retailers. I don't know, we don't really give a shit. But really, we're going to be focusing more on digital, and we're going to be focusing more on getting our characters and IPs into other brackets that are not in retail outlets. And so that is a hell of a shift. And
is it ever?
And because they had 3 months off, they could afford to be like, I don't think, like, I read that there were, when I say I read, I mean, I read off 7 tie-in solo books within death metal that came out or are coming
and
out.
They added more.
I think that 0 of them existed before the pandemic.
See, again, I think a lot of them are repackagings of stuff that they had later, like Wonder Woman and the JSA and like a thing with the Titans. I think those were all supposed to be weird Generations things that they're like, you know what, screw it, put it in here, say it's on one of Batman Who Laughs alternate Earths, and let's just get these done because we commissioned them and they're drawn and we need to sell them.
Oh, absolutely. No, a lot of that shit was done. I could imagine that the only one that was like the last minute change was the one with the Watcher guy, was the Omniverse issue, because it feels like just because I love it. He just reached into the ground. He's like, Metron's back to life. And it's like, that way no one can go, hey, aren't New Gods supposed to be outside continuity? What the hell? Isn't he dead? No, Watcher guy brought him back.
Yeah, because he's a couple rungs up on the cosmic ladder. Man, I love that bit in the story too, where it's like, oh, I have all this DC information, but I don't know what to do. I need contacts. I need to find the DC universe's answer to YouTubers to answer this question for me.
Oh, you're a new reader. You're a new reader.
Literally.
You're looking for where to start. Well, you could start anywhere in our rich library of wonderful, colorful characters. And it all matters, because if those stories matter to you, then it matters. That is exactly the approach. Heartless Fang only got back into reading Western comics during the Rebirth era because it felt like things mattered. Now, really not sure anymore. Here's the thing. Here's what DC would love for me to say. And I don't mean that because they told me. I just mean, like, I can imagine. We're very happy to hear that Rebirth got you in. And I think that while you may have been brought in through continuity, what you discover through reading them was that you were introduced to our wonderful assortment of characters and our incredible lineup of creators. And story is what matters most. And I think that if those stories touched your heart, then those matter most to you. And so if you're excited about what's happening in DC Rebirth, then you are going to be even more excited about what happens in the Omniverse. I would not be surprised if that was if they just steal that and paraphrase it, because like
that's some beautiful ad copy, but also true at the same time.
Exactly. Like at the end of the day, when it comes to comics, to save comics, you have to justify that kind of shit by being like, yo, your favorite story probably didn't happen anymore, but it doesn't mean that they're going to stop printing it. It doesn't mean that it's going to stop being like relevant to you. Even if some jackass shows up and undoes it, it doesn't make that book changed. You know, they're not going to George Lucas it and go back into your old book and change the pages. Like that,
re-edit it.
And story is what matters. Like, you know, how many people love Ender's Game but kept reading the books? And we're like, oh, this is less exciting as it goes on. Like, I feel like there is some measure of truth to that. Monkey says thank you with a animated pear that's exercising, or at least has a sweatband on. Thank you very much. Thank you for your super chat, and thank you for your support. I love seeing those stickers. They're so cute and fun. Anyway, go ahead.
Are you telling me I need to lose some weight, Monkey? Because I do, actually. I'm going back on keto in a couple weeks.
Yeah, no, Monkey, I do. I mean, he's just saying thank you, but that sweatband says it all. It's like a little...
Yeah, really.
Syed Ahmad says, give me a Jeff Johns mark, but I preferred his vision of Doomsday Clock versus what's been going on in Death Metal and elsewhere.
Interesting.
Doomsday Clock had a very interesting approach, and its ending implied a absolute publishing initiative. That it is absolutely a sequel / continuation of DC Rebirth, DC Universe Rebirth, and the Rebirth Initiative. It was absolutely the crescendo to the Rebirth era.
Sure was.
And it introduces a concept that I think could have actually been reworked into what this is, where they're like, except that it hinged on multiple timelines, or on on things recycling themselves every generation.
Yeah.
That's not what we're going to be now. I think that but I also preferred the ending to Doomsday Clock to whatever the hell this is. But
agreed.
Taylor Petchter. So in other words, Death Metal's pretty much just Flashpoint again, a story that was forced into being something it wasn't to begin with. I think so.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty apt comparison, but also, I mean, Flashpoint didn't last this long, I don't think.
No, I also think that, like, Flashpoint was a genuine story that they wanted to tell about Barry, and then turned into a publishing plan. This was Snyder and Capullo fucking around for like 7 or 8 issues or whatever. And so if you are able to just fuck around for 7 or 8 issues, and if you make it matter too, or if you put a couple of teases at the end of it, you know, like look at the end of Dark Knight's Metal and how you don't need that goddamn ending that's drawn by Yannon that has the heroes all go to Wayne Manor and have a rager and talk about how they're going to be in total justice or whatever, like or whatever the hell the next initiative was going to be. Like,
no justice.
No justice. That's it. You could just cut that out, and it's like, oh yeah, no, Death Metal is just or Dark Knight Metal is just a story about this, and so with Death Metal, it's like, yeah, one day you'll just be able to read Death Metal without any of this continuity nonsense or any of this publishing initiative stuff. Like, at the end of the day, Capullo and Snyder are trying to say, hey, stories are fun, aren't they? And maybe they might matter to you. Look at all these characters that live together. Tanner O'Neill, DC seems to need to keep making big changes to the company just because they keep on screwing up basically everything time and time again. I don't know if they're like, I think that they are, it's not so much they're screwing up so much as they can't stick to one vision because they keep, in this particular case, this year is very special in terms of how much turnover they had and how everyone that comes in has their own vision or lack thereof for the direction of the company. And so you're seeing a lot of conflicting visions, and the creators themselves are like Johns was in charge, then wasn't, and still did Doomsday Clock. But he was right. I'm sure he wrote Doomsday Clock from the perspective of, I'm a writer, but I'm also in charge and I'm dictating what's going to happen. Now that he is only, when you look at Doomsday Clock, it's only written from the perspective of a writer. It's like, well, how dare you talk about the direction of the company? You have no fucking idea, and you have no authority to say what's going to happen next. And it's kind of like irresponsible to say where the company's going to be going because you have no control over that, and you're sending out mixed signals to the audience that we're trying to exploit for money. I mean, sell good, really, really good comics too. Like, so I think that's where we are.
They brought Ma Kent back. That's good.
No complaints there.
No, not at all.
Radical Radish, I'll definitely give this to DC. All their out of continuity books are a great way to get new readers because they get attached to the characters instead of them being in a bear trap that is comic continuity.
And not even just the ones we mentioned. Again, we talked about this before we started. Those young adult comics they're coming out with the new Nora and Victor Freeze thing. Yes. Clearly, those are popular and selling well because it feels like every time I turn around, they got a new one coming out now. So, I mean, good on them.
Exactly. No, that is an interesting point to make. And I'm only going to make it in this regard where it's like, those books are popular. They ain't for you, and that's okay because
comics are big enough. It's a big umbrella.
Have you ever been in the toy aisle recently and you're like, who's these toys for? Not you. You're a grown up. Like there's a McFarlane section for you. Like there's a Marvel Legends section for you. But like the other stuff is not for you anymore. And it's okay that like there's a variety of stuff for everybody. And
Fortnite action figures, but there's no story to Fortnite. How can they have action? The banana and the soldier, what? They're part of the same set.
Well, and like, listen, in that regard, I guarantee you that the people who bought Toy Biz's X-Men action figures, of which there were thousands.
Yeah, there were.
Didn't all read X-Men and X-Force, X-Factor, Excalibur,
Oh, no, because they were just amazing toys.
And they told their own stories with them.
They really did.
So, you're kind of guilty of it too.
Fair enough. That's an excellent fucking way of looking at it. Sal, good
right?
One.
Like, I wasn't reenacting key moments from comics with those characters. I was telling my own stories.
Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Cable. Who's gonna win this one?
Exactly. Come on. And like, what a grand yarn that was.
Indeed.
Thank you for your super chat. Super Pooper. I've been sort of off main comics, and every time I try going back, it feels more and more impenetrable with these continuity changing events. Agreed. I think that let it breathe. If you're gonna have an interconnected universe, let it breathe. Don't change it all.
Really do. And so close together, too. That's another big problem DC has had in this modern age. Too many big changes, too close together is the thing.
Yep.
And then having to justify it all to be like, Reverse Flash did it. That's why.
I mean, and if you can, like, in a page or a panel, explain it, feel free. Like, Williamson did a fun job just being like, I was the one jerking you off. But like, if just don't let it dictate the line or the story, you know? I like that things make sense. I like when they explain things that don't make sense and go like, here's how it worked.
I like when I'm rewarded for reading everything.
Exactly. Brandy Stewart, no continuity means that book delays no longer matter. They can get artists and writers who people want to read without worrying about if they can actually get stuff out. Yes, but on the flip side of that, when the hell are these books coming out? And if you have, like, if you're like, okay, everybody in the bullpen, you're fired. I'm replacing everyone with like the top, like the highest echelon, like impossible to get talent. It means that nothing's coming out except the things that we are commissioning. And if everything is Batman Earth 1, you're never going to publish a freaking book.
No.
I do agree, Brandy, that like you have the freedom to be able to tell any story you want. But I think that going full Omniverse is not necessarily the way to go. Just like I don't think going full anything is the way to go. Going full continuity, you never go full Omniverse, and you never go full continuity either. Like you just make it available. Like I was talking to somebody about this the other day about Squirrel Girl. Squirrel Girl is a comic book, and it was selling very poorly month to month at comic shops. Like it sold like 8,000 or less, you know, like really low numbers a month. But it sold like nuts. No pun intended.
No pun intended.
In the aftermarket, in the trade and the book market.
Oh yeah, Amazon, they freaking loved it.
Yeah, Amazon and bookstores and you know, like book fairs and child like markets, like Squirrel Girl sold well. When Marvel looked at their losses and their gains, and they were like, "Oh my god, we got some." And yes, could Marvel have canceled Squirrel Girl as a monthly comic book and just kept those two on to make Squirrel Girl books? Sure, but I'll bet they weren't making less money than they were getting from those 8,000 sales. Mm-hmm. And so in that regard, they're like, well, why in God's name would we cancel a book that sells 8,000 copies and sells 200,000 copies? Like, that's still a number, and it keeps it on the shelf, and it keeps it relevant, and it gives these two an opportunity to keep making the book and to keep being employed on a month-to-month. It helps everybody out, and that's okay. Like, but there's room for that. And it's like that kind of business acumen of being like, I make this thing. It makes more money over here, but it still makes some money over here. That's two places where one thing's making money.
But you gotta love. Furthermore, too, you know, to talk about DC and their digital stuff, they got a new Injustice coming back. Injustice has always done great numbers for them in digital. In fact, it's the blueprint that every digital series should use. And on top of that, they're still coming out with those comics that they had during the pandemic when they were trying to fill stuff up and everything. They couldn't bring stuff to stores, and they're really good. That Superman Man of Tomorrow book, way better than anything Bendis is doing right now. And you know what? They're all self-contained one-shots. Like, again, I got younger cousins and everything who want to get into like comic books. I'd be like, hey, read these, one and done, really good stories. You won't get bored with these, and you don't need to know anything about Superman.
If you ever want to get kids to read comics, do you hand them a comic from today? Hell no. You give them comics that were A, catered more towards their demographic, and B, you give them older books, because older books were way more self-contained. You could give them like an issue, and it contextualizes everything between the front and back cover. So they're like, even if it is in continuity and it is part of an ongoing story, they get a story within those pages, and they can go, oh, like what happens next? Like comic book fans are wired in a certain way. And so I promise you, if you're going to get a comic book fan, it's the same way you're going to get a Doctor Who fan or any other like genre fiction fan. If you give them one thing and it sparks their interest, they will want to know the rest. So for me, that's why continuity doesn't necessarily matter so much as it's okay to keep, because continuity allows you to have this reward for hunting down stories and remembering them. Because for a lot of people, and I don't mean to say that like they're crazy and they think that they're real, but like for a lot of people, these are the stories that like are about people that they care about. And
these are the days of our lives.
These are the days of their lives, and they're reading these stories that matter to them about characters that they care about, and the continuity gives you the relatability and the context to be like, these characters resonate with me, and I care about their journey, and I care about their pursuits, and I'm rewarded for remembering shit because it pays off later on, or even if it doesn't, it's like it makes it more immersive because like, you fool, don't you remember when this happened to you already? And like,
it's a beautiful thing that you only get in sequential fiction, this idea like, hey, I remember that, I was there when that happened, or oh, I heard about this, and the reference again. You don't get that in just about any other thing, and it's a beautiful moment.
No, and the concept of being like, throw away continuity, it doesn't matter, is like, well, okay, take any show and be like, you know what, this show would be way better if there was no continuity between the episodes.
Yeah, no character development, no nothing. You don't know when anything takes place.
Yeah, I mean, you can do that to some extent. You know, like, I'm thinking of Quantum Leap, an ancient show, ask your dad. But like, Quantum Leap was this show that was episodic in nature, but had like an ongoing story of like, and it was very rock simple. Dudes in time wants to come home. Can't. Each story is self-contained, but there is like a narrative about this guy and his friend. He's trying to get back home. If they were like, screw the future thing, like each thing, and you don't even know, like, continuity matters. Michael Fairback,
I think the idea is that continuity serves as a good sauce, but maybe not the whole meal.
Yeah, well, yeah. Michael Fairback, I'd prefer our comic book companies keep headcanons implicit, not an actual plot point. All right. I don't think I can't argue with that.
We should do an episode on headcanon at some point, because I know we all have it. And it's like, look, this on the page, this didn't happen, but you will never convince me that it didn't.
Right. Super Pooper, inconsistent continuity is like a Lovecraftian entity. When I look at it or I try to make sense of it, I go insane. Yeah.
True.
Yeah. Well, it's just you know what it is? For me, it doesn't like make me go like, oh, this doesn't make any sense. I'm questioning everything. It just makes me like upset that these grown-ups can't do this goddamn simple thing.
Like, you want a perfect example of that happened just recently?
Please, yeah.
Nightwing in Death Metal, he's like, oh, geez, I just got my memory back recently and I was thrown into Death Metal. Fuck off, you did. You got your memory back this week in an issue of Batman. Also, you got shot during City of Bane, so you mean to tell me that City of Bane happened like right before Joe? Well, that couldn't happen because Lex Luthor tried to make a deal with him that happened in Year of the Villain that went on along that. You mean that all that happened, then we went right into Death Metal? Like, what, was that the span of a week? That's impossible. None of that can work.
And Death Metal would be like, who cares, man? Why are you trying to make sense of all of this? It's story.
Literally, that's it. And literally, like, that's the thing.
You can't do, like, and it's like, you can and they do, but like, fuck you for doing it, where you're like, hey, man, here's some stories that have a lot of gravity and weight and matter, and like, there's stakes, and you better care. And then it's like, okay, I do, but like, it doesn't make any sense. How come you care so much, man? It's like a gaslighting bully who's like, what? I didn't say it mattered. Why do you care so bad?
Because I read it all. Don't punish me for reading all your stuff.
Yeah, you're convincing me that everything is connected, or at the very least that everything matters, or you're convincing me that all your stories are terrific. So I'm your loyalist customer. I'm reading all your books. And then you're like, I can't believe you read all that. What a lame-o. You remember everything? Nah. Like, fuck you for behaving like that. Even if you're not actually, even if that's not even your, like, the faintest concept for like, for your behavior. That's how your treatment of continuity comes off to someone who's like, it's like doing all this work and then being like, why did you do all that work? I didn't ask you to do all that work.
You know what it is? It's the shitty spouse or partner who's like, why you gotta bring up old shit?
Yeah, what are you talking about? Why we gotta bring that up? We're talking about this now. Tevia says, didn't we do this with Convergence, which said everything happened and lead into DCU, so why are we doing this again? And why wouldn't you bring back Super Sons?
Yeah, that was like 3 or 4 retcons ago. Why you gotta keep bringing up old stuff?
Exactly, what are you talking about, man? Super Sons is over, man. No, they didn't do that with Convergence. It was a different thing. Convergence was a stopgap for them to move. It had nothing to do with continuity. It was just like,
like Future State is a stopgap while they move.
Yeah, They're not moving anywhere, though. They're moving people. They're not moving their studio anymore. That's over.
Yeah.
Scarlet Hottie. I like the one where the lightning bolt man runs real fast. I mean, they do too, and that's all they want. That's all they want you to do. They want you to.
That's a real good one.
They want you to like that lightning bolt guy. They want you to read his lightning bolt stories, and they want you to go see his lightning bolt movie. But they don't want you to They don't want you to care so much that you think that your brain tricks you to thinking he's real, and that these stories all are part of like a structure that's part of a person's life, because that would make their jobs harder. And that's really what it is. At the end of the day, the reason why continuity is hard and why it's even in question at the editorial level is because it gives them something extra to do on their job description. It's something where they're like, fuck, I have to negotiate pay rates. I have to look for talent. I have to edit these books and make sure they don't have spelling or content errors or context errors or grammar errors or printing errors. I got to publish books that have words and pictures. And I got to make all that work. And I got to worry about whether these things that happened to people mattered or did not happen or happened within a
contradict something that happened in the 50s before I was born.
Right. And it's like, no, man, that's what someone else's job is supposed to be. That's supposed to be at the script level. Like, you get the script, you give it to the continuity director. The continuity director goes, here are the changes you need to make. And just have a reasonable human being at that job level where they're like, don't fuck up the story. Like, just circle a character and be like, it can't be this character. Or like, that's it. Just replace the name. Like, sometimes continuity can be fixed by just those two things.
Sometimes it can be fixed by lampshading it, by having characters say, hey, isn't this like something that happened to me before?
Yeah, that's it. Add a panel where this happens. Or just say that. Like, just one balloon that says it here. Or a caption box or anything. For the most part, that's the thing. The problem is when you, as a publisher, kind of unofficially say to everybody, who gives a shit, don't worry about that. And then it all piles up. And then you have to have a crisis. Because things, the little things shouldn't matter. And in fact, I'm sure that most creatives would say, oh no, I don't even bother.
Don't sweat the small stuff.
And we've talked to creators who have said, like, when they started on a book, they're like, oh, I wanted to do all this stuff and make it all work and, fit them all together and do all these homages. And they found out not only could they not do it, but that it got in the way of the story, and no one else was doing that. And nobody cared. So it was like, well, then what the hell am I doing this for? Or maybe I could just tell the story I want to tell and not necessarily worry about that too bad. And
creative people are people too, and they can get ground down.
Yeah. And they shouldn't necessarily have to worry about continuity too much. Like, if you're hiring someone to tell a story, let them tell the story. Have some like number crunching, like super type A person deal with the continuity. You know what I mean? Like, somebody who's like, I remember all that, or I'll cross-reference this. It's just, and by the way, that's accomplishable by A, creating that job, and B, reducing the amount of books you print. But that's a different show.
Yeah. We've mentioned that before. Call them a continuity czar. Give them a little hat and a little desk, and you come to them. Yeah. And like, I come to you, great continuity czar. Tell me what I need to know.
And all you need is like checks and balances, where it's like, you're not in charge. You're not a czar in terms of like, you don't call the shots. Like, you have an equal say, and you're like, hey, this is important, or like, this is change. And then someone else can come to the table and go like, does that matter too much? How much will that fuck up? You know what I mean? Like, what if we did this? Compromise. But like having a dialogue internally, so the writer's just like, I wrote a fun story and I hope they liked it, and then they get it back and it's like, oh, they changed 2 words. They changed a name I made up to a name that was already in the book. Who gives a shit? If I have a thick skin and a healthy paycheck, what do I care? End of story. Scarlet Hottie says, a cool continuity is the greatest hits thing, where they take a long continuity and button it up and find themes. Earth's Mightiest Heroes, for instance. Yeah, Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, a great show that takes the history of the Avengers and kind of condenses it into like a Sunny D-esque, like...
That's pretty good. Young Justice does that too.
Young Justice, Justice League Unlimited does that.
Oh, excellent example.
It's amazing how the movies don't.
Yeah, shocking, right? That cartoons
but
get it so much better.
Yeah, my concern, getting back to the Omniverse, my biggest concern is that it is not necessarily a approach from the editors being like, oh my god, this is hard.
Right.
Let's just make it all not matter and call it a day. Let's
Right.
Spider-Man one more day this shit. I don't want to have to deal with the marriage anymore. Can we just make a deal with the devil at the end? I think that my concern is, what if we know that Warner movies can't handle a DC interconnected continuity universe, or at least they fucked it up.
And they've more or less stopped trying now with stuff like Joker and the Batman, that its own thing, and Flash, that maybe we'll bring some other Batman back into it too. Maybe it all happened. Maybe we're trying out the Omniverse concept here, so we want to try it in other places as well.
I think for them, Spider-Verse's Oscar win and not alienating and confusing people.
True.
We've heard the term multiverse used by Hollywood executives, a word that there's no way they understand or have ever
of course
said before.
not.
And we know that DC's new approach is multiverse. Is to say, oh my god, you mean there's a word in those nerds' language that we could just use, that we could throw back at them when they ask us how things don't fit? Multiverse. Oh, I get it. Oh my god, I didn't have to fucking think of this.
This is amazing. It's a magic word.
Yeah, my concern is that with Warner's new multiverse approach to the movies, that they're like, hey, maybe we could fix the comics situation with that too. And they're like, we have multiverses. It doesn't work like that. Oh, well, what, do you have something else that means like it all matters? I guess Omniverse? Yeah, that.
What's bigger than a multiverse? An Omniverse? You're
Nerd,
an idea man.
Just fix it. Leave. You know, like, especially because we know DC and Warner's and AT&T, they're a lot more homogenized now.
Yeah.
So that's my concern, is that like this Omniverse thing isn't from a place of like experience dictating what they think is the right move, and more like another top down, hey, go do this thing.
Yeah, make it happen.
Make this thing. TB says, will Duke or the Signal / the Signal ever get some development? Are his parents in a cage in the Batcave? Maybe somewhere in the Omniverse he's a leading man, or maybe not. TB, no.
Well, he is getting a Dark Multiverse story, actually. And he got a backup story in the Robin King book. I didn't read Outsiders, but apparently they did Hill did a lot of work with him and actually fleshed out his powers in that book, so that's cool.
Yeah, so I mean, they're using him, but I don't know if he's ever gonna break out. You know when you'll know he will? Here's when Duke will break out.
Do tell.
When Duke is in one of those young adult books.
And there you go, yeah.
When he's the star of one of those young adult books.
Or if he's in the next season of Young Justice, because they already have Harper Row, maybe they put him in. Dude, speaking of Harper Row, mild spoiler for Punchline, everybody. Harper Row is in that book.
What?
Yes. Punchline is a stealth Harper Row Bluebird miniseries. I'm like, you know what? I had no interest in reading Punchline. Now I am all in on Punchline.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah,
it's pretty fucking dope, actually.
You never get it. Yeah, cause I thought she was done for good, as far as being used or remembered.
Not only is she not done, apparently Tynion's getting a second Batman book in 2021, and my theory is, he's going to continue what he did in Detective Comics with Clayface and Batwoman and all these other characters that he kind of shepherded, and I'm all for that because his Detective Comics run was great and ended abruptly.
Yeah. So I'll wrap up by mentioning what Bleeding Cool says about it. What can we expect? We do know that apparently, according to rumor, the Omniverse is coming in March. We know it won't be called the Omniverse, or at least they're just referring to it as such. Apparently, there'll be a one-shot that will relaunch the DC Universe in March, following Future State in January and February. So,
a la DC Universe Rebirth.
Exactly. So you're going to get the Future State stories. Those are, of course, out of continuity. Technically, like, those were going to be the new status quo. Instead, they've been repackaged as an out of continuity kind of like glimpse into a possible future of the DC universe. It will have a whole bunch of like books that were already probably drawn and written and printed that they repackaged and put out as this. and then you will never see it again. Those will come out, and then in March they will launch this new thing, this one-shot special, because they know these one-shot things work really well. DC Universe Rebirth, for example.
Good example.
This Omniverse book will come out. It'll basically dictate what the universe is going to be like, what the rules kind of are.
I'm glad they're building to something.
It will be a relaunch, not a reboot, but will include some mucking with continuity, and
don't they always?
And it will not be by one creative team. Instead, it'll be apparently closer to like the Marvel Now incoming book, which is like a narrative that has a whole bunch of people in it. Apparently, the rumor is that it'll have the people who are working on DC books right now working on this. So it'll be Snyder,
makes sense.
Snyder, Tynan, Bendis, Williamson. I'm seeing some exciting names like Cy Spencer's going to be, or Cy Spurrier, hopefully, Murphy, Tamaki, Ridley, Brian Hill, Ram V, Tom Taylor, of course. And I saw Jeff Johns on that list. I can't imagine Johns wanting to do that anymore, but like, fair enough.
He's like, I'll do it, but I'll just be really passive aggressive about it the whole time.
I'm going to keep referencing metaverses then. And apparently,
I don't think he would be passive aggressive. He seems like a very nice man and a team player, and just genuinely excited about comics and DC.
I don't know. We haven't heard from him in months. The plan is to introduce a looser continuity to the DC universe as a DC Omniverse, as recently teased in Rise of the New God, but only going forward. The intent that everything happened, an 80-year shared universe of continuity. But by introducing infinite multiverses, it loosens the strings of storytelling going forward. That post-Death Metal, basically all of DC's history is in continuity. Everybody remembers every story, but the worlds out there and possibilities are infinite. I honestly don't know what the hell that's supposed to mean. And by that, I don't mean I'm an idiot and I don't get it. So please spare me your comment. But like, I'm more like being like, okay, so Batman remembers like having a dog that fought crime with him and like went to different planets and hung out with Batmite and also remembers having his back broken and also remembers, like everything. Like, okay, I get, like, you could, basically what you're saying is that the DC Omniverse is more or less the Marvel continuity, where it's like all that shit happened. And it's like,
that's what it sounds.
All right, you know what? In a world of death metal where Batman, for no good goddamn reason, dons a leather trench coat with spikes on it for some reason, helping him in battle.
This is fucking badass.
Yeah,
that's
like
why.
He rides a motorcycle that has a bat skull with ears. Ears are made of cartilage and have no bones.
Because Alfred's dead and not going to tell him he can't have a motorcycle.
Yeah, made of giant bones. I guess you could say, yeah, no, and also he did this, and also he did that. Like, also he went into space, and also he went through an imaginary like wormhole and got married and had like Batman 2 and Robin 2. And like, by the way,
read the Black Case book.
Those stories are like imaginary stories in their own continuity, where they're like, oh man, imagine if we got married and what would happen to our offspring and stuff. Like that shit happens. So like, if you want to say Detective Comics, all like whatever 27 Detective Comics 27 to now all happened to Batman. All right.
Yeah, sure, why not?
That's fine. If it's I'm more okay with it all happening than none of it happening.
I would agree. In fact, it feels very much like something Grant Morrison said once, to bring it back to the Black Case book. No, it's all chapters in someone's life, you see. It was really like synthetic in the 60s and everything, but it all happened. It was all like years in his life for one man, and that's why he's this crazy person that he is.
Yeah, exactly. Well, then how do you explain Green Arrow, though?
Yeah, because he was like an archaeologist and shit when he started.
Yeah.
Green Arrow's not going to have a book. Who are you kidding?
That's fair, but like, listen, if it all happened and if you want to Marvel up DC's continuity, I'm okay with that, because I like Marvel's continuity and I like the Marvel Universe's structure and I like the idea of that. If you restore the New Gods to being this thing outside continuity that like just doesn't get changed and shit, like if you get them back to basics, if you fix all that shit, you fix everybody, I'm okay with that. Like, I am 100% okay with that.
Same.
And for me, it's less the question of whether it's in continuity or whether it's a good idea to make it all part of continuity. For me, I'm like, knock yourself out, do it.
Man, what is this going to mean for Hawkman, who's like, no, but my whole life and all continuity was already always part of my story. This changes nothing for Hawkman.
It really doesn't, actually, because it's just like, yeah, it was this, and then it was this, and then it was this, and it was this.
You're all just me now.
Yeah, and they tried to do that in 0 Hour. They were like, you're all Hawkman. He's like, that doesn't work.
Don't take away my one special thing.
Yeah. Taylor Petcher, in other news, did you see that another round of layoffs has hit Warner's this week? AT&T is just consolidating everything, and it's very concerning. I mean, like, that sucks. It doesn't surprise me. And I feel for everybody in that situation. But like... Yeah, I don't know. DC's in a weird space, and my genuine hope is that that everyone gets what they want. You know, if Warner's wants to make movies that make a lot of money, I hope they get to do that. If we want to read fun comics about characters that have an ongoing history, I hope we get that. If you want to read a story about Superman being a crazy murderer, I hope there's a book for you out there. There's plenty of them. Although you could read like 17 of them and none of them are called Superman. There's a book for you, and hopefully DC and AT&T and Warner's, like, that their approach isn't like from a perspective of like, well, fuck comics. Like, I hope it's the approach that Marvel has with Squirrel Girl, where it's like, I mean, it makes money. You know, it doesn't cost more than it brings in. So
we can have our cake and eat it too.
Exactly. Well, I might as well put it out. Mr. Q-Man with another hilarious GIF of a pair with a headband going fist bump. He's animated doing that. Fist bump to you too. Thank you very much for your support and for your hilarious GIF. I like that guy. And Radical Radish sounds like the Simpsons timeline, honestly. You could call it that, man. Call it the Simpsons continuity.
It's a pretty solid timeline too, where we occasionally go to the future, and it's always a little different every time. And the timeline is always slipping.
See, the thing with me is that, like, whenever the future stories are not in continuity, that way. My problem was when they went back in time and they updated Marge and Homer's like origins, where it's like, no, they
met in the 90s.
Yeah, I'm like, no, you could just change the year, like, or not do that, because like they reference a lot of the past without having to date it. Anyway, that's the Simpsons. Yeah, so. I honestly, thinking about continuity and thinking about the Omniverse, I'm actually a little bit more excited about it than I was before.
Same. We kind of talked ourselves into it over the course of this episode, I do believe. Yeah.
Just as long as stories did happen, then I'm okay with that. You know. The problem is, of course, like, don't make Elseworlds stories also have happened. Like, Elseworlds, out of continuity stories is not like, no, all of it. Like,
including the Dark Multiverse, that also happened.
Yeah, that's gonna. I mean, fine. I'm okay with that. That sounds fun. Like, that sounds like a. You know what? DC's never really tried it. So why not? You know what you could always do when it's over? Have a goddamn crisis.
And just wipe the slate clean again, which you can do, which I think maybe in that way it makes them a little bit more daring, where they're like, look, if it's fucked up, we'll just have another crisis.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's always a get out of jail free card for DC, and it's called a crisis. I'm cautiously optimistic about the DC Omniverse.
Same.
I hope it works out.
Same.
The problem is, of course, like, the issues I think everybody's having is that, like, DC is clearly disorganized.
Oh, yeah.
And that's apparent from, like, whether Generations is connected with Future State and how it was going to be, and that it isn't, but it's called Future State anyway. Like, nah. Get your ducks in a row. But I like the idea that it's all in continuity. That actually takes less pressure off of their editors, too, because they're like,
it really does.
It all happened, or it didn't, whatever.
We'll figure it out. It's up to you nerds to figure out. You comic book YouTubers, you figure it out for us and tell people.
Yeah, you let them know. I mean, why not? They recognize that there's another element to the industry, which is commentating, and they're like, let them do that.
Yeah, they'll let them do the heavy lifting and make the timelines and charts and everything.
Yeah, why should I have to make these goddamn charts? That ain't my job description. I don't blame them. But yeah, so I'm hoping for good books. I'm hoping for more story, and I hope that it's all in continuity. I want that to matter. We want to thank you so much for hanging out with us. Listen, we're going to keep talking for another 15 minutes or so over on patreon.com/ComicPOP on a show called One Shots. Check it out if you want. Otherwise, we'll see you guys here. Stick around for more tomorrow. Back Issues is dropping, and I have a feeling it's going to be about one of the biggest selling books of the month.
Interesting.
So we'll see you guys then. Thanks a lot for watching, and that's it for us. So long, everybody.
Bye-bye.